Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge, the one and only podcast in English about Lazio. So, if you're a Lazio supporter, if you simply want to know more about the first team of Rome or the oldest team of South Italy, this is probably the right place for you. You can find us on Spotify, on iTunes. You can follow us on our social account on Twitter, on Facebook. And if you love the show and want to support us, we have our Patreon page, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Membership starts at £2. And we have our shop with lovely t-shirts and hats. I've been wearing some now in France, and they're really cool. So if you want to support us, you have many ways of doing it. Said this, let's start talking because we have so many things to talk about Alistair McKenzie. But first of all, can you understand that in 1 month time there's the derby?
Less than 1 month. I mean, it's. I mean, by now I think most of us are probably used to the idea of the Serie A fixtures taking a while to be published. It's very annoying. I don't think there's any real excuse for it, but we're used to it by now. But yeah, this is the first instance where this has happened, where not only do you have to wait this long to find out the fixtures, but when they arrive, you find out that you're actually already within the kind of derby countdown, which is absolute madness. I mean, week 2, first home game of the season, having a Rome derby, first time it's ever happened, the earliest derby of all time, I think, in the calendar. And yeah, I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about it. I mean, we've had a few questions for our show tonight on Twitter, so thanks to everyone who's sent them in. And I'll start with this one, and I'm going to send it to you first because I think I need a bit longer to think about it. But Alexander Mikkelsen is asking for our thoughts about having a derby in the second round, and he says, who does it suit best?
Well, you would say that Roma probably changing the manager, selling a lot of key players like El Shaarawy, that was probably the best player they had last year. De Rossi leaving, they're going to Manolas leaving, etc. So Lazio should be the team that has less changes, so should be already able to play at the same level of last year. So you would say Lazio's the favorite. But on the other hand, you have to consider that Leva has been injured and should be back training in the next couple of weeks. Marusic will be out for a month, so probably is going to be back for the start of the season. Strakosha still didn't play an official match, and so on. So I think the key is going to be which condition Lazio player will have for the second leg of the match of the season. One thing important that I didn't think about was at the end we have to say that Lazio have been lucky, because if Roma was forced to play the preliminary round of the Europe League, they would have to start the training earlier, and probably they would have arrived to the second day of the season already really in good condition, while Lazio would be still, on the way to the top form. So I think that's a positive way of thinking it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there's no doubt that Lazio are the more settled team. You've got a team that's obviously still got the same coaching staff in place and not really had a huge turnaround in terms of what we're expecting from the starting lineup, at least the first choice starting lineup for next season. Whereas Roma, new coach, a whole new group of players, kind of rebuilding their defence there, new goalkeeper. But I mean, you can look at it one of two ways, I suppose, because on the one hand, Lazio is the first home game of the season, more settled team, more recent derby win. But on the other hand, I'm sure Paulo Fonseca will be looking at it as the absolute perfect opportunity to kind of kickstart his time at Roma, because as a Roma coach, it's a bit of a golden opportunity. As much as it's an intimidating prospect, the idea of being able to get a derby win under your belt within 2 weeks of the season starting, I'm sure will have him and his players psyched up as well. So I don't think we want to read too much into the whole unsettled new Roma thing. I think that it's already an unpredictable fixture, and it becomes even more unpredictable, I think, because it's so early on in the season. We don't really know what to expect from Lazio either at this stage. So I'm quite excited about it, but I'm still a bit stunned, really. I'm still not really recovered from the news, actually.
Yeah, and again, it hasn't been an easy draw for Lazio, I would say, because starting away with Sampdoria, it's not an easy start. Then you have the derby, and then you have Spal, that has been a very promising team last year. So, yeah, I was hoping for a better start. Obviously, I think we'll agree it's not as bad as last year, but even finishing last year, remember, we played Napoli and Juventus one after the other in the beginning of the season, but finishing even with Napoli, at the last match, is not very nice. It can be dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, they've clearly very intentionally teed up the final round of fixtures to be quite an exciting one, to get a big TV audience in there, because Lazio, Napoli, I think Roma are playing Juve, Inter playing Atalanta, I think it is. So they've obviously put a lot of big games together at the same time. I'm not sure, though, if it's... I don't think you ever get such a thing as an easy fixture list. I don't think this year we've got a particularly terrible one. I've seen some people have quite extreme reactions to it in one way or another, but I think getting a home match against Roma early on, the thing is, if you win that game, that's a real springboard into the rest of the season. We saw that last season, that the impact of that derby win really propelled that team into finishing the season pretty strongly with the Coppa Italia win. And I think that's a real opportunity. And also beyond that, I mean, you don't really have any big games until week 11, other than Inter. There's Inter in week 5, and other than that, you have to wait till week 11 to play the next kind of big team, in inverted commas, which is Milan. But the one thing I think will be absolutely crucial, I saw this as it was coming out, there's a little run of games right in the middle, weeks 8, 9, 10, 11, where we've got Atalanta, Fiorentina, Torino and Milan in a row. And I think that is the kind of run of fixtures that can really decide which way this season's going to go. That is a run where you really need to be in your best form. So that was something that stood out for me as well from that fixture list.
And the other important thing that is not happening this year that happened last season is that you don't have back-to-back big matches. So you're not playing Napoli and then afterwards Juventus or Inter and afterwards Milan. So this should help the team, recover and don't have two very important weeks that can decide your season, and maybe have players injured like it happened last year against Sevilla. So this could be a positive side. Obviously, we still have to remember that Lazio will play in Europa League, and that obviously would affect performance. Alistair, do you think Lazio have a team big enough to compete in all the three competition, because there's still Coppa Italia as well?
No. No, I still think that the squad is not really any better off than it was last season in terms of depth. I think bringing in Lazzari has really bolstered a weakened position. So obviously, out in the right wing back role, that depth has improved. But otherwise, you're not seeing an awful lot of great improvement. Denis Vavro, we'll wait and see what he's like. Obviously, it's good to have another defender in, but we're also expecting to have a defender go out. And then Johnny on the left wing, a bit more depth there, but currently we've got a hell of a lot of depth there anyway, because Dermisi and Lukaku are still Lazio players as things stand. So no, I mean, I still think I still want more to happen between now and the end of the Mercato, because, like you say, I mean, this happens time and time again. The Europa League is a wearying competition, especially between the start of the season and the turn of the year during the group stage. A lot of travelling, a lot of midweek games, and you can't really afford to let that take a negative impact on your league form. An interesting question we got as well, which I'll put to you, is from Stephen Scarpulla, who's asking about a predicted starting 11 for week 1. Asking if we think Lazzari and Johnny will both start on the wings. Where do you think the team's at the moment? I mean, I think obviously injuries are a consideration here, but assuming everyone's fit, I'd say.
Well, I would say, thinking that, well, I hope Strakosha will start playing in Germany like it's supposed to be. I think the starting 11 at the moment looks to be like Strakosha, Vavro, Acerbi, Radu, Lazzari on the right, Milinkovic-Savic if he stays, Leiva, Luis Alberto, Lulic, Correa, Ciro Immobile. This should be the starting 11 for me. But we have to say, Alistair, that the coming weeks, they are finally biggest friendly match. Lazio till now played with Lega Pro team as best. Now they will play bigger teams, and so we will really see how this team will play, how the new players like Vavro, because let's be honest, Vavro haven't been tested. You cannot say that Mantova is a big test for a defender. You can see, Ciro Immobile scoring, etc. But it's against big team, more important team that you can really test the players. So these coming weeks will be important for that. But as it stands now, I think this is going to be the starting 11 for the coming week. And I think I said it in the last podcast. Faris, that is the Vice Inzaghi, said that Johnny is very offensive-minded player, so he'll need time to learn how to defend in the Serie A. So I think he'll learn. Maybe in December he can become the starter there, but at the beginning of the season, if Lulic is not injured, I cannot see someone else starting instead of Lulic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually wrote down earlier the exact same team that you read out, so we're on the,
I didn't read it, honestly.
I mean, to be honest though, that's pretty much, it's almost ironclad, that team, because, yeah, I suppose the only thing you might bring up, like Steven Scarpulla did, was whether Johnny might start, but I would expect, in all honesty, Lulic to be starting come the first game of the season. And beyond that, obviously, it depends on things like injuries and the Mercato. And I think we'll get on to Milinkovic-Savic a bit later. But before we do, actually, I think, yeah, you're right to mention these friendlies. I think this is a really interesting period coming up now. Obviously, Alonso is now over. The squad finished their training session there a few days ago, and now on Friday night, we've got this game away to Bournemouth, which, I mean, it's a bit of a step up, really, isn't it? Like you say, going from playing a Radio Club Alonso and some Liga Pro teams to playing a Premier League side. I think that'll be a really interesting match, and these games we've got coming up against Bournemouth, Paderborn and Celta Vigo, these will be the real tests of where this team is at, because I think up until now it's been quite hard to get a true sense of how excited we should be about various players, about how concerned we should be about others. And Friday night will be quite an exciting opportunity to do that, I think.
Yes, and one thing, instead there are two. I said at the beginning, in 1 month time, there's the derby, and Bastos still haven't trained with the team. This is too funny, and he could be one of the starters, but can he make it for the derby? I don't know. And the second, Alistair, as you said, the 2nd of August, I think, there's Bournemouth Lazio. Would you play players like Strakosha, who just arrived, Lulic, that finish Alonso with a little bit of problems, Leiva, and so on, or would you make them start in other friendly matches?
Well, I think that's entirely down to the fitness team and the coaching team and how they judge, I suppose, the condition of the players, isn't it? Because you don't want to make any unnecessary risks in a friendly match. I mean, don't forget, everyone will kind of forget about this match as soon as it's happened, more or less. It's obviously a much better test than the ones we've had so far, but it's not worth risking players for in any way. So I would expect any of these players you mentioned who've had injury problems niggle so far, I very much doubt that they'll be involved, or well, definitely doubt that they'd be started against Bournemouth. But I think in a way, though, that's not the worst thing, because it gives an opportunity to some of the other guys to really put a hand up, and in a way it could be a blessing in disguise to have your number 2 keeper or your Vice Leva have a chance at actually getting some games, because those are 2 of the most ironclad positions in the whole team. So well, it's an actual opportunity, I suppose.
I'm hoping to see goalkeeper number 3 playing instead. I want to see Guerrieri perform against a bigger team than Mantova. That would be really interesting to him, to the club. And, if he plays well against Bournemouth, then I would send him on loan and keep Adamonis as a third goalkeeper. Because let's be honest, it has to be something really bad to be forced to play the third goalkeeper in the season. So you don't have to waste Guerrieri there if he's that good and show it up against Bournemouth.
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah. It's just one of these ones, especially with a goalkeeper, you have to get the loan right, because goalkeepers don't get the chances that other players do. So for me, a goalkeeper of his age, if he's going on loan, we need to have you never get assurances 100%, but you need to be pretty sure that he's going to be at least considered a first choice when he arrives at whichever club he goes to, because there's very little difference in him being a third choice at Lazio and him being a second choice at a Serie B team. So that would be my one concern about sending him away on loan. But yeah, it has seemed like a bit of a waste for a while now to have him lurking around, and obviously finally got his debut at the end of last season. But yeah, I'd be a bit careful about loan moves with goalkeepers in general.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Right, should we get on to some Mercato stuff?
Why?
We love talking about this, don't we? Well, Vittorio, our very loyal listeners have been asking us questions, so not much has happened. I mean, when did we last record? About a week ago, just over a week ago, and if we're honest, it's been more of the same kind of stuff, hasn't it? Milinkovic-Savic, will he stay, will he go? And a bunch of other fringe players talking about leaving, and the same kind of players being linked with the club. But shall we start, before we actually get on to any of the real questions here, shall we start with some actual news, which is that Lazio have signed a player today, Gustavo Cipriani, or Cipriano. I'm not entirely sure if he's Brazilian, how you pronounce it.
It should be Cipriano, I think. Cipriano, Gustavo okay. Cipriano de Avezzado, I think. Azevedo. Sorry. Yep.
But yeah, so for anyone who's not heard about this, 18-year-old centre back, come from Santos. He'll be on loan for the first year, and apparently the option to buy is set at €750,000. But Santos have managed to agree to get 15% of a future sale. But yeah, I mean, this was quite an interesting one, I thought, because reading up on him, apparently Iglitare has been chasing this guy for quite a long time, for about a year, and has had a fair few offers put on the table. I think 4 offers already before he finally managed to get him. So clearly Iglitare thinks something of this guy. He's not played a single senior game for Santos yet, so there's not an awful lot. I can't really say anything about him, but it does sound like he's a prospect to keep an eye on.
So his agent talked a lot to Rome radios in the past month or so, saying that last summer already, Lazio was pushing to sign him, but Santos didn't allow him to leave. The player wanted badly to leave and to go to Lazio, I don't know for which reason. And so this agent has been working a lot in the past 2 months to to find an agreement. Santos didn't want him to leave. Obviously, Tare didn't want to spend that much money for a youngster. But at the end, the fact that the player was pushing so much, they found an agreement. I think the buyout clause, it's €1 million for Lazio to sign him after this loan. I think it's very similar to the deal Lazio made with Capuani, the striker or offensive midfielder that played for Lazio Primavera this season, with the difference that this guy was considered really a great player. He's a central defender that someone compares to Felipe Luis. He's very good with his ball on his feet. It's a type of defender that all the new managers want, right? The one that can start playing football from the back. He's tall, but he's not very physical. He needs to eat, as people would say in Italy, because he's not that strong. But yeah, I'm really curious to see him playing next year in the Primavera near to Armini. I did a video today on my YouTube channel saying that this could be the defense of the future for Lazio. You know, Armini on one side, Cipriano on the other one. Very young, very talented, very high considered players. I mean, if things goes well, then Lazio could have the starting central defenders for the next 10 years.
If things go very well. Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously the intention. That's the reason the efforts have gone through to bring this guy over from Brazil, is because he is so highly rated. And, you know, I've seen some articles about him being the next Luis Felipe, because it's another case of scouting in Brazil for young talent and making an effort to get them over at a young age. And Capani, who you mentioned as well. I think, yeah, it's obviously he's been signed to go into the Primavera team. Good point you make about Armini. Obviously, Armini was highly thought of enough by Inzaghi already to be taken on various trips in the squad with the first team last season before eventually actually getting to play. And it'll be interesting to see how many opportunities he gets in the coming season, because Vavro has come in, but there are places up for grabs in that defence, especially with so many competitions. The game's coming thick and fast, and a three-man defence looking like it's staying put for next season as well. So I don't know how likely it is that we'll see Cipriano in the first team in the next season, but I wouldn't be too surprised if he's at least brought along with the first team squad on a few occasions when we're a bit short.
So Inzaghi talked about the defense in the first press conference of the season he did, and it was the first after Lazio won the Coppa Italia as well, and talked about the defense. He said that if Bastos come, there are too many, so they're looking to sell someone. We hope Wallace. And he said that 6 are probably the right number, and I believe that Armini will be the jolly, right, between Primavera and the first squad if needed. So I think this is what's going to happen. This means, I don't know if someone asked us, that Lazio's not at the moment looking to sign for a left centre-back defender if someone else leaves the club. We know Wallace is in talks, but basically if Bastos doesn't leave it well, then Lazio's not going to sign any other defender.
Yeah, I think that would be an error, to be honest. We've had some questions about this. Madipa has just written to us, "I'm not confident of our defence," he says, even though Vavro was added. He says, "Any update on Wallace's departure and possible replacement?" He wasn't the only one to mention defenders. Sorry, just trying to find them now.
Well, I think it's still the biggest question mark for Lazio, because people are concerned after what happened last year, I think. So, I mean, it makes sense. Vavro, we know Lotito doesn't spend very often that much money, so we all hope he's going to be an upgrade, a great player, but he still comes from Denmark. We already had the Denmark football expert on our podcast, and he talked really well about Vavro, but we know it's going to take time to adapt to Italian football, so we hope he won't need that much time, but yeah, at the beginning he's going to struggle, so we're going to see what's going to happen.
Here's a more general one then. SK Moore asking thoughts on the summer Mercato to date. Who do you think needs to leave, and what still needs to be done to satisfy Laziali? Do you want to start with who needs to leave?
Well, probably Wallace needs to leave, even though he started the last friendly match, but Inzaghi rotated a little bit the team there, so I don't think it's very relevant. As you said, on the left side, Lazio at the moment has Lulic, Cioni, Turmisi, and Lukaku. It's true that Turmisi and Lukaku, well, I think Turmisi will go in Germany again, so he should be back training. Lukaku, still no sign of him. But the thing is, talking about the wingers, Inzaghi mentioned Lukaku, but didn't mention Turmisi. That does mean, he said, we have two couples. We have Lulic and Johnny on the left side. We have Maruzic and Lazzari on the right side. Lukaku is still not fit, and Patrick could be the jolly that can play on both sides. So even though Turmisi was at our own, so he forgot to mention him. So that does mean that he's out of the project. I don't know. Berisha, he said he will join the team, so I think Berisha is still part of the project. Maruzic obviously is part of the project. Badelj, he's trying to recover him. So I don't know. At the moment, these are not the players that are on the sell list. I think Wallace, maybe Bastos, could be those players leaving the club. And Turmisi, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think another one you can throw onto that list is Milan Badelj, probably. I don't think he appears to be entirely happy to be a reserve, to be a second choice. And obviously Danilo Cataldi's been given certain kind of votes of confidence by the club as well. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like a bit of a shame to me in a way, because he seemed like such an excellent signing at this stage last season, especially considering that he came in from Fiorentina, Serie A rival, on a free transfer, a very experienced player, international player, and it seems like a bit of a shame. And he has had a few good games. I mean, I think people write him off a bit too readily from last season. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised to see that go ahead. Genoa's the latest club that are supposed to be showing interest in him. But the midfield's kind of a bit of cause of concern for me now, because if you do sell Milan Badelj, and then if a huge offer does come in out of the blue for Milinkovic-Savic, all of a sudden that midfield is looking pretty threadbare. I mean, Valon Berisha, like you say, is going to be reintegrated by the looks of things, but one thing we know about him by now is that he is not reliable fitness-wise. And then you're left with Marco Parolo, who is, Mr. Invincible, but the guy is 35, going on 36 now, I think. And there's not too many options in that midfield all of a sudden. So I think that, to be honest, for me is still a big priority in this market. I think more people are concerned about the defence and the striker. For me, I'd like to see all three. A left centre-back, a striker, and the centre mid would be my ideal trio of signings before the end of the market. I don't for a minute see that happening, though.
No, I think, Alistair, the problem is that if Lazio doesn't sell Milinkovic-Savic, and at the moment there are question marks there, I think the transfer market of Lazio is over if Badelj doesn't go out, and I think Inzaghi doesn't want to let him go. I think the transfer market for Lazio is finished. Now, from now on, Lazio will try to sell players. We still need to know what's going to happen to Pedro Neto and Bruno Jordão. They were 3 weeks ago, this Portuguese papers were saying that it was done to Benfica. And now they're training on their own in Portugal still. Nothing happened. They're not going to reach Germany, and I really don't understand why. And still, they are still Lazio player. So
yeah, and on top of that, this guy Yusuf Yazici from Trabzonspor, who's been such a cunt name in the Lazio websites and papers, looks very much like he's going to move to Lille now. We have to wait and see what happens with our other man, whose name I don't want to try and pronounce, Dominic CalvertLewin or whatever it is.
Slobozlai. I hope.
Sign him in a way, just don't have to try and work it out. Slobozlai.
Yeah, I think. Well, Masei can help us out. I think he got the pronunciation right. He can help us, but it should be Slobozlai. But again, Salzburg already started the league. He played the first match. Salzburg is not in need to sell players, so I think it's going to cost very much for Lazio. So do we have to? I mean, it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say as well to add as kind of positive to this is that as the days go by, I'm really not feeling. I suppose I'm growing more and more confident as the days go by about Milinkovic-Savic staying around next season, and it's pretty clear by now from everything that Lotito said, everything that Inzaghi said, that the club are going to listen to offers if they come in. But the Premier League transfer window shuts in 9 days from now. In that time, for the current reports in Italy to turn into something concrete seems highly unlikely, especially when you consider the fact that in England, the reports have been barely anything compared to what they've been in Italy. I mean, everyone sounds absolutely sure about it in Italy, and in England, it's an entirely different story. On top of that, you've got them supposedly chasing deals for all sorts of other players, including Bruno Fernandes, who is obviously a more attack-minded player, but is still considered an attacking midfielder, and Harry Maguire, and all sorts of kind of potential deals. And for me, it's quite unlikely at this stage. I mean, things can change very quickly, but I'm starting to really feel like he may well not end up at Man United. And if he doesn't end up there, then there's no one really out there who's going to be signing him by the looks of things.
Well, there could be still Real Madrid, I think, if they don't sign Pogba. And the other thing that makes me laugh a lot is the agent of Milinkovic-Savic took a plane for London to discuss with Manchester today, yesterday, Saturday, Friday. I don't know how many times have you been to London in the last 4 days. He's always flying to London. I mean,
he's just stuck in a plane circling around Gatwick Airport. So.
You know how serious can be these rumors really when every day he's flying to London to talk about the contract with Manchester United. Can he not rent a hotel there and stay every day there? You know. So, yeah, we're going to see. The fact is, we know that Manchester have been talking with Lazio and have a general agreement on the price. But we know that it's very difficult to find a deal in details with Claudio Lotito, because even the 15 million bonus, Lotito want real cash, easy to get. Well, I don't think Manchester United is willing to offer that. So 9 days is really not that much, especially because before you have to sell Pogba and then you have to find a deal with Lotito. I have to be honest, last week I was pretty much convinced that Milinkovic-Savic would sign for Manchester United. As days go by, it's going to be more and more difficult. And as you were saying, you know, Manchester United is signing players very similar to Milinkovic-Savic. Do they really need Milinkovic-Savic? And on the other side is, do we still consider Manchester United a top team? I mean, next year they're going to play the Europa League. I don't think they're going to be fighting for the Premier League title. Yes, they're a better team of Lazio, and Milinkovic-Savic is going to get a higher salary there. But, you know, it's not Real Madrid for Milinkovic-Savic.
Well, yeah, I mean, quite right. I think that could be a big part of it as well, because supposedly a big part of Milinkovic-Savic's willingness to move on after 4 years at Lazio is that he's fallen short of being able to qualify for the Champions League with this club, and that is the competition he wants to test himself in. So, is he willing to wait? Is he willing to bank on United qualifying for the Champions League through the Premier League next season? Is that any more likely than Lazio qualifying for the Champions League through Serie A? I mean, it's not. I would agree. It's not the club it used to be. It's probably not got the pulling power it used to have, and those are the kind of stories you hear all the time about Paul Pogba's own future and his supposed unhappiness and disbelief that they can really challenge anytime soon. So, yeah, and with the Real Madrid question, it's a whole other thing. They've already spent tons of money this summer, and I find it hard to believe that they're going to pay an extra 90 million on a player who up until now they've really done very little to make any sort of advances to whatsoever. So yeah, it's a tricky one because it's almost exactly what we said we didn't want to happen at the start of the season, which is that if he's going to be sold, I think we want him to be sold probably already, but I think it's going to drag on a while longer.
And the thing, Alistair, is Yazici looked to be close to Lille. I think Tare has a secret name that nobody talked about it, because otherwise, who do you buy to replace Milinkovic-Savic? And Inzaghi wants a player that is already ready for the Serie A, not someone that comes and need 1 year to get to Milinkovic-Savic level. So we're going to see what happens. But yeah, if Milinkovic-Savic is happy to stay at Rome, then I think this would be the best solution for the club.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to move on to one last thing while we're on Mercato, just a bit of a talking point this week. I wanted to know what you thought about it has been about Patrick, because Patrick's been linked with a move to Fiorentina, and obviously he's not necessarily the most popular guy among Lazio fans. What would you think about him being sold? Because obviously his strength is in his versatility, but would you be against it at all?
How can you be against selling Patrick? I mean, we're not talking about Ciro Immobile or Milinkovic-Savic or Luis Alberto. But as Lazio Lounge tweeted this morning, he's very useful. He can play in the central defender position. He can play on both wings. The question is he happy to stay knowing that he's the alternative in a lot of position but not the starting player? Last year was fine. We have to see this year. Obviously, it's not the player that makes the difference and allow Lazio to win the Champions League, but you know that you're going to be during the season in a situation where you're going to be an emergency, and Patrick can be a very useful player. I still think he's very dangerous when he plays central defender, but yeah, he can fill a lot of gaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I was kind of surprised in a way that it became such a talking point because it's Patrick. But yeah, I mean, exactly. He fills a lot of gaps. But the other thing I would say is that there's, there's a bit more cover in the positions that he might be able to cover. Now that Lazzari's coming on the right, now that Johnny's coming on the left, Vavro's come into the defence, and in having the likes of Armini and Cipriano from the Primavera, I'd be almost happier to see them be given a shot instead of Patrick in centre back. So if there's money to be made from selling him, I'm happy to see him go. But I'm not an anti-Patrick. I don't hate the guy in the way that some people seem to.
I'm simply not convinced any offer have arrived yet. So, I think. Let's not forget that Lazio this summer spent already 22 million euros. Usually in the past, Lazio was selling players and then were buying. This year, Lazio already spent 22 million euros and didn't sell nobody, because at the end, Lazio didn't sell nobody. Waiting for Pedro Neto and Bruno Jordão, if it will ever happen, then you will get back the money you spent this season. Otherwise, you will be minus 22. So I think that from now on, Tare will try to recover that money somewhere. Maybe selling Wallace to Wolverhampton at 8.5 million euros, selling maybe Durmisi and get other 8 out of it. So, it's already 16. And then at that point, if someone comes and offer 5 for Patrick, guys, you made your balance, right? You spent 22, you're getting back 22, it's perfect. Yeah. And if you're in an emergency situation, then you bring someone up from the Primavera. I think Primavera is useful for that, right? And you have Andre Anderson, that is a very talented player. You have Adekanye. You have some youngster that can be used for this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something we all want to see more of, I suppose, more development of the youth prospects. But now that there's actually a Primavera team that's back in the top league of of the Primavera setup, I think that gives it a bit more, a bit more backing from the club, probably, to be able to say that these guys are perhaps a step more towards being ready for it. Anyway, I think that's us.
Okay, other questions? I think we don't have them. Obviously, now it's the most important part of the summer training, even though our answer is very important to bring all together. Inzaghi tried all the tactics, the defense movement, especially for Vavro, that it's a new coming. Lazzari to get used to Lazio's tactic, even though he looked like he was playing for Lazio for 10 years, as he was amazing. But now the most important part of the season comes. We're going to see really how Lazio will play against big team, and that will give us more important feedback for the rest of the season. So keep following us, because every week we're going to try to do a podcast with the latest update, not only transfer market, but talking about friendly match and the latest update from the Lazio world. So guys, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, on Spreaker, on Spotify. Alistair always follow us on Spotify. He loves it. And follow us on Twitter at Lazio_Lounge, on Facebook, facebook.com/Lazio Lounge. And again, if you love the show, please subscribe on our Patreon page. Thank you, Alistair. Have a good night.
Cheers.